Morning. It's a pleasure to have the opportunity to welcome back Brother Guy Consolmagno. He's been at MBA before. This is his second visit. A little bit of history about him. He earned his PhD at the University of Arizona's prestigious Lunar and Planetary Laboratory. He spent a couple of years in the Peace Corps in Kenya. He's got some exciting stories from that, I'm sure. And he was an assistant professor at Lafayette College in Pennsylvania before taking vows in 1991. At that time, he was assigned to the Vatican Observatory as an observer and also as the curator of their meteorite collection, of which the Vatican has one of the largest in the world. He's even spent some time on Antarctica searching for meteorites and finding meteorites. And he's got a actual asteroid named after him in his honor. He's a well-known author, including his guidebook to the night sky, which is called Turn Left at Orion. I'm actually looking forward to buying that. I have not bought that yet. And his most recent title, Would You Baptize an Extraterrestrial? It's with great pleasure that we welcome him back to MBA, this time in his role as director of the Vatican Observatory. He's going to be speaking tonight at 5:30. We invite everyone, we're going to be in Pfeffer, we invite everyone to join us. Thank you.
Thank you very much for having me here. The reason I'm here, as opposed to any of thousands of other high schools, is because of an alumnus of the school, Rob Zellum. Rob graduated, I believe, class of '04. I was going to look him up on the wall there, 03 or '04. And in '07, he came to a summer school that the Vatican Observatory holds every 2 years, where we invite students from around the world. We get maybe 200 possible applications of students who are going to be professional astronomers. And we're inviting them to come for 4 weeks of an intense study in astronomy with some of the leading astronomers in the world. The very first school that we had back in the 80s, one of the instructors was Vera Rubin, who's the woman who discovered dark matter in galaxies. So these are 4 weeks of intense study at a graduate level, and the only rule is that any students who come, we can only choose 25, have to be the best that we can find that are going to be professional astronomers, and no more than 2 from each country. So the majority of them actually come from developing world. Rob was one of the 2 who were selected from the United States. He was studying at the time at Villanova, got his astronomy degree there. This past year, he got his doctorate from the prestigious Lunar and Planetary Laboratory, the same place I did. It's a little more prestigious now than it was then. And he's now studying exoplanets. He's studying the compositions of planets discovered around other stars. He's certainly one of the most outstanding young astronomers in America today, and he's a graduate of MBA. So I figured I've got to find out something about this place that can produce people like him. And all of you guys are just as crazy as he is. The real place where we connected was I had in my possession a videotape of one of the worst science fiction movies ever made called Star Crash. Came out in 1979, and it has the mechanical monsters and everything bad in a science fiction movie. And it was made by a cheesy Italian filmmaker. While he was at the summer school, Rob grabbed my copy, found that filmmaker who is now selling movie memorabilia in a little shop in Rome, and got him to autograph my VHS for that. So not only is he a great astronomer, he has great initiative, which I take it is also a trait of an MBA student. You're probably wondering, why does the Vatican have an observatory? And my answer to that, of course, is to say, why not? Why doesn't every religion support a major observatory? Astronomy is one of those things that reminds you that there's more to life than, what's for lunch. But there's actually a deeper religious basis to all of science. By a religious basis, I mean there are things about science that you have to have a certain religious belief or you wouldn't be able to do science in the first place. And not every religion has these beliefs. So in fact, there are some churches I can imagine would not do a scientific institution like an observatory. For instance, if your religion says everything is illusion, everything is a figment of your imagination, and there are people who say that. There's a whole philosophy called solipsism that says, you don't exist, I just had something really awful for breakfast, and I'm imagining you. And the story goes, George Bernard Shaw was giving a lecture and mentioned solipsism and defined it that way. And someone came up afterwards and said, but I am a solipsist, and so are most of my friends. Think about it. How could she have friends if they're all... Never mind. If you believe that the universe is an illusion and we can never know about it, if you believe that last night I had a dream where I was a butterfly and now I don't know if I'm a scientist who dreamt he was a butterfly or I'm a butterfly dreaming that he's a scientist, and I can never know, and it's quite true, you never really can know, but if I don't take on faith that this physical universe actually exists, how can I study it? How can I spend my life studying it? But I do believe that. And it is a religious belief because there are some religions that don't have it. I believe that the universe makes sense. I believe that the universe acts according to laws. There are other religions that don't believe that. The ancient Romans, they had an explanation for why things happen in the universe. You see a lightning bolt and you go, him. God of lightning, right over there. That's you, Zeus I'm looking at, Jupiter actually. You're the one who did that. Stop it. I tell you what, I'll give you my best goat if you stop it. I'll slit his throat on your altar. If you think that lightning occurs because the whim of some lightning god threw the lightning bolt, then you're never going to ask yourself, wait a minute, how come lightning always hits the tallest things? Wait a minute, if I put a little lightning rod there, could I do something about it? Wait a minute, could I bottle lightning in a Leyden jar and then maybe use it to power my iPhone? Which you wouldn't have an iPhone if you didn't believe the other things. You have to not believe in nature gods in order to ask the deeper question, if it's not because of nature gods, then why did it happen? To believe that everything that happens for a reason in a predictable way. That's a profound change in the way people think about the universe. And you will find lots of people even today who believe in superstition, who believe that, wearing their lucky socks will cause their favorite football team to win, who believe that things happen because the nature gods made it happen. I don't believe in the nature gods. The ancient Romans persecuted Christians because they thought that we were atheists, and they were almost right. The only difference between me and Richard Dawkins, famous atheist, I only believe in one more God than he does. And the God I believe in is not a nature God, but a supernatural God. If I didn't have that belief, I wouldn't have the faith to do science. So where does science start? It starts in the medieval universities, and the first scientists were themselves monks, in fact, Dominicans. The father of science in many ways was Albert the Great, the first geologist. And he was such a great scientist and such a great thinker that he could also teach theology to his crazy student, a fellow named Thomas Aquinas. But there's a third thing, and the hardest thing of all to believe if you're going to be a scientist. You've got to believe that it's actually worth spending your life wondering about the motions of stars, wondering about why does lightning flow this way rather than that way, wondering about the physical universe. I don't mean so you can grow better crops. I don't mean so you can have better engineering, but just because the physical universe itself is so wonderful that it's worth studying. Why would anybody be an astronomer professionally, spend their life doing it? Not many people do. The number of professional astronomers in the world is probably about the same as the number of professional football players in the NFL. Not that many. Why would you do it? To get rich? Pick the wrong field. To get famous? Name 3 famous astronomers, I dare you. To get girls? Didn't work for me. Why would you do it? I had a hard time answering that question when I was a postdoctoral fellow at MIT. I was 30 years old and doing pretty. MIT, it's the big, great institution, my alma mater, best science and engineering school in the world, despite what those guys at Caltech might say. And yet, though I'm in the big leagues, and though I'm doing major league science, I'm missing something. And I lie in bed at night wondering, why am I wasting my time studying astronomy when there are people starving in the world? And I didn't have an answer. And that's when I quit science and joined the Peace Corps, because I wanted to do something useful for people rather than this stupid astronomy stuff. And I went to the Peace Corps, and they sent me to Kenya, they sent me to Africa, and I asked the people there, what can I do with my background, with my education? I thought maybe I'd teach high school in a little upcountry school where there's no windows in the windows and no black on the blackboards. And instead, they sent me to the University of Nairobi to teach graduate students astronomy. I thought, this was the same useless thing. I could have done this back in Boston. But every weekend, I'd go up country with my other Peace Corps friends. We went in as a group of 70. And most of them really were up country in schools where there's no windows in the windows and no black on the blackboards. And I'd bring my little telescope with me, because I did bring a little telescope, because I do kind of like looking at the stars. Even though I can't think of a reason why it's worthwhile, I still just get this jolt of joy every time I look through the telescope. It's something really wonderful. And so I'd bring my telescope up country, and I'd set it up, and everybody in the village where my friend was a Peace Corps volunteer would come out, and they'd look through the telescope. And anybody here ever see the moon through a telescope? Yeah. Anybody here ever see Saturn through a telescope? Is there anybody in this room who has ever seen Saturn through a telescope and not gone, oh, wow, or even stronger? Yeah. And guess what? Everybody in Africa is going, oh, wow, just like my friends back in Michigan, because that's what a human being does. Now, in those days, I had a very, very clever cat. My cat was much better at being a cat than I could ever be. But my cat never wanted to look through a telescope. And it suddenly hit me, this is why we do astronomy. This is why we look at the universe. Because it gives us that jolt of joy. Because it gives us the chance to ask the questions, what are those stars? What is this place? How do I fit into it? Because asking these questions and having that joy is what makes us human. And we all have a hunger for that. And to deny somebody that because, oh, I'm sorry you were born in the wrong continent, sorry you were born in the wrong century, is to deny them their humanity, but to feed them, well, we don't live by bread alone. I read that someplace. To feed the soul is to remind yourself that your life is more than just an endless questions of what's for lunch. And then I realized that jolt of joy looking through the telescope, that jolt of joy that I get when I plot 2 variables that I've collected data on and find a correlation I didn't expect. That jolt of joy when for a moment I understand something that I didn't understand before. That's the same as the jolt of joy that I get in a moment of prayer. And that by studying the universe, I'm studying the creation of the God I love, because my religion, as does Islam, as does Judaism, teaches us that God not only created the universe, but number one, was outside the universe when the universe was created. God's already there before anything else. God made it out of nothing, not just empty space. Space itself was made from nothing. If that's the case, God expresses himself in the things he's made. And it's not me saying that, that's actually in a letter from St. Paul. And not only is this universe God's expression, but it's so wonderful and God loved it so much that he sent his Son, which is what we're celebrating at Christmas time. Then you realize that to do pure science is an act of worship. And here's the most remarkable thing. Even if you're an atheist, you agree with me. You could be an astronomer who studies comets. Comets are great because by the time you've published the data, the comet is gone and nobody can check up on you. So let's say you figured out a way of faking your observations so that you found the spectral signature of chlorophyll in this comet. Oh my gosh, there's plant life in the comet. And you could publish this, and you could make a name for yourself, and you'd be on the front page of the New York Times, and you might be able to write a book and get rich. I don't know if you get girls, but you get at least the power and the glory and the money. And okay, nobody's going to find out that you're lying through your teeth until long after you're dead, so who cares by then? Would you do that? No scientist I know would do that. Even the most glory-hungering atheist scientist wouldn't do that, because it would violate everything that science was to them, which is the search for truth. Because even if they don't think they believe in God, to be an atheist, you have to have a very clear idea of the God it is that you know you don't believe in. Otherwise, how can you know you don't believe in that God? And an awful lot of atheists I know don't believe in a God that I don't believe in either. But even if you think you don't believe in God, you believe in truth. You believe in the importance of truth. That is something outside of this universe. That is something supernatural, worthy of dedicating your life to. And just happens to be the God I believe in, who is the way, the truth, the life. So it means if you are worshiping God, you will always pursue the truth, knowing you're never going to have it completely. And you will never be afraid of finding the truth, because any religious person who's afraid of science has no faith in their faith. But any scientist who's afraid of asking the reasons why they're doing the science is not being very rational about their rationality. Thank you very much.